It's warmer this way, isn't it? Our hands became intertwined in my pocket. I had never even held a woman's hand before, and panicked terribly. Hey, Emily, what are you doing? As I hurriedly tried to pull my hand away, she gripped it tighter and said with a smile, I've decided not to hide it anymore. My name is Michael, and I'm 31 years old. Right now, I'm reluctantly putting on a shirt I don't usually wear for a high school reunion, sighing in front of the mirror, thinking, I don't want to go, maybe I should skip it. Suddenly, my phone rings. Annoyed, I answer it, and the woman on the other end immediately says, Are you ready? Have you left your house yet? Don't tell me you're still hesitating in front of the mirror because you don't want to go. She guessed my situation exactly. There's no way that's the case. I hastily moved away from the mirror. Then hurry up and go, right now. Her shrill voice spurred me on, and I grabbed my bag and rushed out the door. Today is the high school reunion. Normally, I make up excuses not to go, but the woman I just spoke with on the phone insisted I attend, so I reluctantly agreed. Although I understand the reasons for going, my emotions are different, and my steps are heavy. As I walk slowly towards the reunion venue, a man brusquely passes by me. He stops at the traffic light ahead. Then, glancing at me, he exclaims, Michael, is that you, Michael, and approaches me. The first person I run into is someone I'd rather not meet. It's me, John, remember, long time no see. The man talking to me without regard for my frowning face was the popular guy in high school, John, always at the center of things. Tall, handsome, popular, he was always enthusiastic during school festivals and sports days, lifting everyone's spirits. John now walks beside me, matching my pace. You finally made it. All my invitations finally paid off. I thought you'd never come. You were always so quiet in high school, always reading books. Labeled as a quiet kid. Indeed, I was always reading books outside of class. I loved historical books. But what he might not realize. Since meeting John, I haven't said a word. Despite my silence, he keeps talking. What mental strength he must have. I've just been quietly observing John. Am I the only one talking? How have you been? Been well. Finally, he seems to notice my silence. I give her a smile and reply. I've been fine. John laughs at my response. You don't look fine at all. What are you working as? I'm in securities now. Suits me, right? What about you? You must be doing some dull job. Want me to refer you somewhere? I have a few connections. Again, he rambles on without giving me a chance to speak. No need to worry about me. I reply, and John looks at me with pity. Are you really okay? You seem to be struggling. Saying this, he looks down at my feet. Puzzled, I look down and see my familiar sandals in my field of vision. In my haste, it seems I left the house in my usual sandals instead of the leather shoes I had prepared. I lose all motivation to attend the reunion. As I was thinking about going back home, suddenly, John pulled my arm. I was led into an alleyway between buildings. What's this all of a sudden? To my protest, John placed his index finger to his lips and whispered, Shh, there's a really beautiful woman over there. I felt deflated at John's words. So what? I replied without even looking in that direction. She seems to be waiting for someone. Keeps looking around. Maybe I should go talk to her. John, with a gleam in his eye, was peeking towards the street. Do whatever you want, but why do I have to hide with you? As I was grumbling to myself, John said, I'm going to talk to her. Watch my courage. I'll impress her with my Chinese. With that, he left me in the alleyway and darted off. Chinese. The beautiful woman must be a foreigner. With a bad feeling, I stealthily peeked towards where John had gone. Just as I thought. I leaned against the building, holding my head. "Hey," I heard John's voice, speaking Chinese to the woman. I couldn't hear the woman's voice. Probably, she was ignoring him. Then, John started to babble something in Chinese. From the words I could catch, he seemed to be bragging about his job and asking for her contact information. After a while, I heard the woman's exasperated voice. "Can you please stop with that annoying bad accented Chinese? I can speak English." Her assertive voice echoed, and John was momentarily silenced. But he didn't back down. "Wow, your English is great. Awesome. Hey, why don't we go on a date? Just once. I earn a good salary, so I can take you anywhere you like. Even to places like San Francisco or Las Vegas." John switched to English and confidently continued his flirtation. The woman sharply replied, "I'm waiting for someone." But John persisted. "Is that a man? A woman? Do you have a boyfriend? It's rare to find a guy better looking and earning more than me. Why don't you give me a chance?" Interrupting John's words, the woman declared, "I have someone I really love. There's no one better than him, and of course, you are out of the question." Her piercing words left John stuttering. Who is he? There can't be such a guy. He was clearly shaken. I was shaken too. I hadn't thought she had someone like that. Then, the sound of heels approached. And then, it's this guy. Suddenly, my wrist was grabbed and I was pulled out of the alley. John looked stunned. My face must have looked even more foolish. "Huh?" As I uttered a silly sound, Emily, the Chinese woman, frowned at me. Even with that expression, she was incredibly beautiful. Her shimmering black hair was glossy, her eyes dark and exotic. Her skin was pale, and the freckles added a mature yet youthful look to her face. Her high nose bridge and full, attractive lips were striking. From those lips came an angry voice. "Why the sandals, Mr. Anderson?" Her high-pitched voice pierced my ears. "It's because of Emily. She rushed me to leave quickly. The person I had been on the phone with when I left was Emily." My defense was futile as she retorted, "That's why I kept telling you to put the sandals in the shoe cabinet. I knew you'd end up wearing them by mistake, and see, it happened just like I said." Speechless, I clammed up. Emily sighed and pulled something out of a paper bag, thrusting it at me. "Leather shoes." As I muttered, she raised her high nose even higher and said, "I thought this might happen, so I bought these. I'm glad I came to check if you were actually coming. On the way here, the thought of you in sandals crossed my mind. I thought it wouldn't hurt to buy a pair of dress shoes, just in case. I'm an excellent editor, aren't I?" Seeing her satisfied smile, I humbled myself. "You're the best editor in the world. Thank you." I took the shoes and changed out of my sandals. John, who had been watching the whole scene dumbfounded, finally spoke. "Wait, you know each other, and your favorite person is Michael. What's going on?" He was full of questions, with imaginary question marks floating above his head. Emily answered proudly. "Mr. Anderson is a rising best-selling author, and I'm his editor. As for my favorite person, that's irrelevant right now, isn't it?" Even John seemed taken aback by her unwavering smile. I let out a sigh. "Wait a minute, I'm not really a best-selling author or anything." As I started to speak, Emily cut in. "Stop downplaying yourself. Please focus on the interview. That's right, the reason I came to the reunion. It was. I am rather plain and have a hard time imagining a protagonist with a cheerful personality. My characters always turn out gloomy and unremarkable, so I came to interview people who had a bright and fulfilling high school life. John was the perfect candidate. So, I asked him directly. "So, John, would you mind if I interviewed you?" John chuckled at my straightforward request. "What, am I just a stepping stone for you? Wait, you're an author now, writing novels." Now it was my turn to chuckle. Well, I write under a different name, both children's books and novels. I'd like to write historical fiction, but I'm lacking in that area. So I've been writing young adult novels. Emily here is pretty demanding, I said, glancing at Emily with a frown. Emily, 7 years younger and my new editor at a publishing company, pointed out my slump in historical fiction. Mr. Anderson, heartwarming stories suit you better. How about a young adult novel, something a bit touching? She insisted. This made me resist her suggestion. I could handle short stories like children's books, but I couldn't write long, tear-jerking narratives. However, Emily, with her direct gaze, convinced me. You can do it, Mr. Anderson. It's perfect for you. Please trust me and try this direction for your next book, please, she pleaded. The young adult novel we reluctantly collaborated on. About a plain guy like me who becomes a runner in a district relay race and experiences family bonds, friendship, and a little romance. Turned out to be a moderate hit. As Emily and I worked together, my writing flowed more smoothly and the story developed effortlessly. It became my best-selling book and remains my most well-known work. Still, I yearn to write historical fiction. Whenever the topic of my next book comes up, I always suggest it. But Emily's response is always hesitant. If it's about a modern-day high schooler encountering a historical figure back from the dead, then maybe I'll consider it. Hearing this, John looked utterly amazed. Wow, I don't read novels much, so I didn't know, but if it's that amazing, I may give it a try, John said, and I hastily shook my head. Don't read it. You really don't have to. John burst into laughter at my panicked reaction. Don't be so against it, but I get it. A plain guy as a protagonist. That means it's about you, right? I blushed deeply. The foundation of that story was entirely a product of my experiences mixed with my imagination. One time I was forced to participate in a district marathon because my mother was one of the organizers, and it was a complete disaster. But in the novel, I altered the outcome. The friendship depicted was merely a figment of my imagination. A plain guy who always buried himself in books and romance. That was even more of a fantasy, a distant world for me. The thought of my high school classmates reading that book and recalling me sent shivers down my spine. After a good laugh, John said, Okay, I won't ask for the title. I can probably find it if I search, but hey. A little teasing like this is fine, right? Being on good terms with such a stunning beauty, I'm jealous. I have completely forgotten because of the scandal incident, but come to think of it, didn't Emily call me her favorite person? The realization made my head spin, and I was no longer in the right state of mind for interviews or the reunion. Since I couldn't focus, I decided to record the interview content. After about 2 hours, when the reunion ended and I left the venue, Emily was waiting outside. Her cheeks were flushed. In the winter season. How long had she been waiting? I rushed over to Emily. You didn't have to wait. I handed her a hand warmer from my pocket. It was still slightly warm. She took it and showed a smile. It's warm, thank you, but then she forcefully slid her hand into my pocket and intertwined it with mine. It's warmer this way, isn't it? Our hands became intertwined in my pocket. I had never even held a woman's hand before and panicked terribly. Hey, Emily, what are you doing? As I tried to pull my hand away in a hurry, she gripped it tighter and said with a smile, I've decided not to hide it anymore. She leaned closer to me. Were you thinking about me these past 2 hours? Feeling the warmth from where she touched me, my body heated up. It was a completely different atmosphere from usual. Shall we go somewhere, preferably somewhere we can be alone? Hearing this, my mind nearly short-circuited. Eventually, we headed to my apartment, my workspace. Emily said she had a somewhat sensitive matter to discuss. Since it's also my workplace, Emily, being my editor, frequently comes in and out. Trying to stay calm in a situation where we were alone, my heart wouldn't stop racing. Emily, familiar with my kitchen, made tea and sat across from me. I looked down at my tea, waiting for Emily to speak. "Mr. Anderson, were you surprised about me liking you?" Her casual mention of liking made my heart race. "Really? Is it true? Not just a lie to get rid of John?" I asked, and Emily's expression turned serious. "It's really true. I decided to become an editor here because of you, Mr. Anderson. I studied English really hard for that." Emily's English was indeed fluent. She wouldn't have become an editor in America otherwise. "The reason is me." "What do you mean by that?" I struggled to grasp her meaning. Then, Emily took out a picture book from her large bag, handling it carefully. Seeing the book, I was astonished. It was my first published picture book. A little boy, angel in the sky, chooses which parents to be born to. The parents he chooses eventually start to argue and drift apart. Born to be the child of a couple who once seemed happy, the boy makes a decision one day. To bring smiles back to his parents' faces, he decides, "I will be the light of happiness in our home," and tries to never lose his smile. He decorates the house with beautiful pictures, flowers he finds on the roadside, and cutesy shells from the beach. Little by little, lights of happiness begin to shine in the home. These lights eventually reach the mother, then the father, and finally, they bring back the smiles of both parents. This picture book was the first work I ever submitted to a publishing house, and luckily, it won a prize and was published. Afterwards, the picture book didn't do too well, so I shifted to writing novels. But it's a work that holds a lot of sentimental value for me. I first became interested in America because I heard that the American people are friendly and the cities are well maintained. Emily began, looking fondly at the slightly worn picture book. "My parents had a bad relationship when I was about 13, constantly fighting. Besides, the house was always a mess. I wanted to escape to a world that was friendly and free of clutter. I just wanted to get away from that house." I listened to Emily's story with a solemn expression, feeling a sharp twinge deep in my heart. One day, I thought, I should go to America. I should learn English, but just studying was boring. So, I decided to read stories. I've always loved reading since I was a child. Then, she searched the internet for books in simple English. Thinking picture books would be written in easy language, she checked the contents of several. Among them, she came across my picture book. I didn't quite understand it, but I was drawn to it. Even before fully understanding the content, I thought, "This is it." She was surprised when she read the book she had ordered. I felt strongly, this angel boy is me. I was born to be happy, yet not happy. Did I do anything to become happy? No, I just disliked the status quo. Like the boy in the book, I decided to increase my smiles one by one. Despite her parents' moodiness, she kept smiling. She gave her father birthday presents and cleaned the house when her mother didn't. The cleaned house felt refreshing, like little lights of happiness were being lit. Patiently, she continued to light these small lights, untangling each tangled thread, one by one. And the result? I hesitantly asked, and she looked down, taking out her phone. She then showed me the screen with a smile. There was a lovely photo of Emily, smiling closely with a middle-aged couple at what seemed to be an airport. It worked out. Emily nodded with a broad smile. It was tough, especially at the beginning, but now, my parents are really close. They even apologized to me. They remembered that they loved each other and got married. Really, it's all thanks to this picture book. As she finished speaking, she looked at me in surprise. I was crying. "Mr. Anderson, what's wrong? Did I say something bad?" I wiped my tears and shook my head. It's me. As I strained to speak, Emily asked softly, "What is it?" "It's just that angel protagonist is me from my high school days." My voice was choked as I spoke, and I sensed Emily's surprise. My parents got along fairly well, I think. My father was busy with work, a bit strict, but he made a great effort to spend time with the family on his rare days off. My mother was a homemaker, always supporting my father with a smile. Their relationship soured after my father had an affair. It was a brief, frivolous relationship, but my mother's intuition was sharp, and she soon found out. My father became defensive, and my mother chose not to divorce for the sake of our living. Since then, it's been like a silent separation in our house. That family in the book is mine. The reconciliation, just a dream of mine. The last scene of the book shows a happy family of 3 enjoying an amusement park. My childhood memories of going to an amusement park are still vividly joyful. But my family never got along. It's been nearly 10 years since I left home. My parents still continue their cold relationship. They could have divorced, and there were some ways to make a living. But my mother is not the type to take action. My father, whether he understands my mother's feelings or not, does no household chores and is still working. I haven't returned home for years, and my parents haven't asked me to come back. I wrote that book, but I never really put in any effort. It was just a wish, splattered onto the manuscript, but I'm glad. I wiped my tears and managed a thin smile. Someone was saved by looking at that picture book. Unlike me, a child who actually made an effort. Thank you, Emily, for telling me that my book had a meaning. As I took Emily's hand to express my gratitude, she smiled. I should be the one thanking you. That picture book held my family together and gave me a big goal to pursue. As I gazed at Emily, she formed a smile. I became determined to be involved in the work of the person who wrote that book. It gave me so much motivation. I applied to the publishing house that published most of Mr. Anderson's works and passionately talked about him during my interview, and then the first offer they assigned me to was Mr. Anderson. I'm so lucky. The people at the publishing house are really kind. Emily said this with a full smile, but the truth was probably different. I was probably a difficult author for the publishing house to handle. I'm reserved, without significant accomplishments. Despite not having great ideas, I'm fixated on historical fiction. That picture book was just something I wrote as a break from writing historical novels when I was in high school, using my own family as a model. It was a decent piece, so I just happened to submit it to a contest. Then I became an author who wasn't doing well. For someone who eagerly wanted to be my editor, the publishing house must have been thrilled. As I gave her a smile, Emily smiled back. Any path is fine. I'm happy to be Mr. Anderson's editor now, and to be able to create works with him. My dream has come true. Emily genuinely smiled, satisfied. I'm greedy, so I have another dream now. Emily looked straight at me and said, I want to become the angel boy for Mr. Anderson's parents. Her black eyes sparkled as she spoke. Mr. Anderson, your father and your mother, I want to rekindle the bond between the 3 of you, and of course, I want to do that as your wife. I was taken aback by her words. I can do it. I'll light up each lamp in Mr. Anderson's family home. So, Emily leaned in close to me. Make me your wife, Mr. Anderson. I was almost swayed by her cuteness. But, Emily, you've made so much effort. Reconciling your parents, mastering English, getting into an English publishing company, and compared to you, I've made no effort. Not with my parents, not with my writing. I can't stand proudly beside you unless I make an effort in something. As I spoke earnestly, Emily looked surprised. Mr. Anderson, you are making an effort. Confused, I looked at her, and she smiled. I know you've been visiting museums and ordering difficult materials to write historical fiction. That was something I didn't want to be known. Embarrassed, I blushed deeply. And your novels afterwards? My heart skipped a beat. They always referred to your childhood stories. I thought you had a wonderful childhood, but it was different. Those were the lights you wanted to bring to your own family. Hearing this, I couldn't help but tear up again. And really, a child doesn't have to work so hard. Just the fact that you want to try is admirable. Emily gently hugged me. You'll make me your wife, right? I nodded repeatedly in her embrace. I felt pathetic, crying in the arms of someone 7 years younger. As I confessed this, she confidently said, I'll take so much care of you, and I just melted. Later, I properly confessed to Emily. That day had been too one-sided. Dressed in her favorite suits, I was on my knee before her. I love your earnest efforts. I will protect you for a lifetime. Please marry me. Emily was moved to tears and immediately wanted to meet my parents. Right now, surprised by my reaction, Emily said with a wink, strike while the iron is hot, right? Eventually, we went straight to my parents' house, 2 hours away, bringing a foreign beauty home so suddenly. My parents were shocked. But Emily quickly won their hearts. Before we knew it, she had created a group chat with my parents. Emily sent pictures of small moments of happiness to the group every day. The color of the clear sky, a contentedly sleeping cat, a single resilient flower blooming through a crack in the asphalt, and a tiny sprout peeking out from a planter. Each photo was like lighting a small lamp, and my parents would reply with small messages, to which Emily and I would respond. Gradually, those connected lights began to shine brighter. Years later, who wants to go to Grandpa and Grandma's house? Emily asked, and our 2 children responded with excitement. Our son wanted to play soccer with Grandpa, and our daughter was eager to cook with Grandma. Even I felt my spirits lift. The lights Emily persistently lit now brightly illuminate my family home. The house, once filled with the cold air of a silent separation, now warmly welcomes us, with my parents greeting us with smiles. Lately, my father even sometimes cooks for us. He's been learning to cook, taking lessons from my mother. Who could have imagined such a scene? Yet, this was exactly the scenario I had dreamed of. Thank you, Emily, I said. She shook her head with a smile. It's only because you didn't give up, Michael, that I didn't either. Her radiant smile made me smile too. Sure, we might argue sometimes, but we always want to continue lighting those small lamps of happiness. Why did you think you could use this hotel? Your name isn't even on the reservation. An old geezer like you would be better suited to the old motel next door. Just use that. I was thrown these words by my boss, who is over a decade younger than me. At first, I couldn't comprehend what he was talking about. But knowing him, these words didn't feel out of place. However, it was only when things started to get worse that I truly felt the weight of those words. My name is George Smith. This year, I turned 52. I've been working at my current company for about 30 years. It's a consulting firm for small and medium-sized enterprises, and I am just an ordinary employee. I didn't join with any grand ambitions. I simply liked the work of supporting people and companies and felt it suited my nature. I live with just my wife and have led a life unconnected to promotions. As for me, I find happiness in a situation where my wife can do what she wants, how she wants. The company I work for isn't a large corporation. It falls under the category of small to medium-sized enterprises. We have just over 40 employees, creating a rather homely atmosphere. In my department, including myself, we are a team of 6, managing operations in a small group. The head of our department is a calm individual, just a year older than me, and we often engage in various discussions. The other members, although younger than me, interact with me warmly, much like a beloved uncle in the family. I genuinely think it's a comfortable environment, but such tranquil times are often disrupted by trivial incidents. One day, as usual, I arrived at work to find an unfamiliar young man sprawled in the seat of our department head. The previous head, who had been there until yesterday, was nowhere to be seen. For the time being, I decided to sit at my usual desk, but it seemed like the other members were also unaware of the situation, feeling somewhat restless. When the morning meeting started, the young man at the head's desk moved next to Mr. Johnson, the company president, and was introduced. His name is Michael Green. At 40, he is a decade younger than me. His suit seemed rather high-end, just from its appearance. When Michael was introduced by Mr. Johnson, he stepped forward, surveyed the room, and spoke briefly. "I am here to reform this company. I've come to seek newness and create a better role model. We will revamp anything outdated, so I look forward to working with all of you." It appeared that the previous head had been transferred to another department. It was a sudden personnel change, and we hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye. Being a small company, I thought there would be another opportunity to talk. However, I soon realized how wrong I was, just an hour after Michael's introduction. From the very first meeting, Michael began to criticize the existing methods and practices of our department. "Why are these documents printed on paper? Wouldn't electronic communication be more cost-effective and easier for information sharing? Is all contract communication done on paper? It's feasible to carry documents for local enterprises, but what about distant ones? Apply for electronic signatures and make them official for the company. A consulting firm that cannot utilize IT tools is bound to be left behind. I'll be leading the training, so please attend." It was unbearable to have everything we had worked on changed by someone who had just arrived. I decided to voice my opinion. "I appreciate your input, Michael, but most of the companies we've contracted with are based on the scale of company and informational assets, focusing on human resource and sales material. Changing everything on our end could significantly affect our clients." "That's the problem with old-timers," Michael muttered loud enough for others to hear. I felt slightly irritated. However, Michael, standing before me, seemed oblivious to such nuances in people's emotions. Unfazed, he repeated my statement. "Are you Mr. Smith? What factors are essential for branding our consulting business?" "Can't answer. That's lamentable. Listen, consulting is a business that shapes the future of companies. How can you consult without being aware of what many companies are currently adopting? Sticking to old ways will leave you behind. Change your mindset. Adapt to the times. Turn your everyday routine into something extraordinary." Hearing him, it seemed like he wanted to say that his words should be our top priority from now on. A different type of personnel than we've ever had, but it was a mystery why Mr. Johnson hired Michael as a mid-career recruit with a position. Mr. Johnson often says that building a company is all about recruiting and nurturing talent, which is essential for the company's success. However, this personnel decision seems to contradict his words a bit. It might be that Mr. Johnson's attitude when he's watching is different from the one he shows to employees like us. No, I'm certain it is different. Ever since Michael announced his plans for reform at the meeting, every day has been a torment for me. The company not only made significant changes to our previous operations, but also organized a so-called training session outside of working hours, which turned out to be a showcase of self-praise. Furthermore, it's now up to each sales representative to communicate these changes in contracts and data to our clients. Michael would nonsensically ask, why does he have to be the one to tell them? It should be us who haven't kept up with the times to do this. Michael frequently uses terms like outdated and old-fashioned. It seems he considers himself at the forefront of innovation. Naturally, He wouldn't leave older employees or those nearing retirement untouched. I don't consider myself overly prideful. But even I have things I've cultivated over time, like relationships with our clients. Yet, Michael even attempts to negate these. Mr. Smith, your methods are inefficient. We need to shift to a more cost-effective and high-return approach. Specifically, change your sales methods like this. What he suggested was the complete opposite of everything I had worked on. I explained the background and the company's long-standing practices, but Michael, now the head, simply scoffed and refused to listen to me. His behavior didn't stop there. It became increasingly harassment-like. He made us record our sales calls and teleappointments and submit them. Later, he'd call me in and lecture me for hours on what was wrong with my sales approach. Many employees, drained of the will to resist, accepted this ordeal in silence, hoping it would end if they didn't object. Initially, I thought of adopting the same approach but found it impossible to accept. That must have unamused Michael. His attitude towards me worsened day by day. When calling me, he would shout, "Hey," and I heard he was referring to me as that old fossil, that nuisance, behind my back. Whenever Michael entertained company visitors, he invariably assigned me to do miscellaneous matters. He would then mock me, pointing out, "You see, there are roles in work, and when you get old, this is what suits you best." The visitors could only offer awkward smiles and didn't continue the conversation, but Michael seemed thoroughly pleased with himself. I couldn't understand why he was so intent on attacking those older than him. Amidst all this, I was drowning in daily stress, but I still had my wife. I thought as long as she and I could maintain a decent life, I could get through this. That was when it happened. The company decided to organize an employee trip for bonding purposes. We were going to a fairly well-known hot spring town by bus. The hotel seemed more suited to younger people, but it also had open-air baths and cuisine that our age group would appreciate. I was excited to relax for a change. I told my wife I was leaving and set off for the meeting place at the station. It was only a few hundred meters away, a nice bit of exercise. My carry-on bag wasn't heavy, so it wasn't too tiring. The weather was clear and refreshing. I arrived at the meeting place. I was about 30 minutes early. Looking around, I saw no other employees, so I decided to enter a nearby cafe. The cafe was air-conditioned and comfortable. I ordered an iced coffee and enjoyed it at my table. A good day off. I hoped the employee trip would turn out well. But 5 minutes before the meeting time, not a single person had shown up. Thinking something was wrong, I called several colleagues. However, no one answered my calls. Eventually, I decided to call Michael. I really didn't want to, but I felt that not calling him in such a situation would lead to more trouble later. After several rings, I heard my superior's voice, tinged with laughter. "You're late. We've already left. You should catch up using a bus or taxi." With that, he hung up. I checked the email I had received. The time and meeting place were correct. The sender was Michael. I couldn't tell if he had intentionally sent me the wrong information. Despite my previous excitement, I decided to go to the hotel by connecting buses, not wanting to let the other employees down. I arrived at the hotel. It took about 3 hours. If I had taken the bus, it would have been just 40 or 50 minutes. Entering the hotel's entrance, I saw Michael standing there. An insidious smile on his face. He pointed at my bag and blurted out, "Why did you think you could use this hotel? Your name isn't even on the reservation. A geezer like you belongs in the rundown and next door. Go use that." What is he talking about? Before I could process his words, Michael snatched my luggage and left it outside the entrance, pointing to the next door. "Come on, get moving." This was nothing short of bullying. I never expected to be treated like this, especially by someone younger. I was stunned, but exhaustion from the bus ride sapped my will to retaliate, so I moved to the adjacent inn without protest. Michael's laughter echoed behind me. At the inn, the landlady personally attended to me. She kindly carried my luggage and showed me around the inn. Despite its slightly worn appearance, the interior was well maintained and comfortable. Upon reaching my room, the landlady said, "Please relax," and left. Eager to wash off the sweat, I headed to the large public bath. It was quaint, a bit old-fashioned, but to my liking. The inn featured a sauna and an open-air bath, satisfying the basic elements of a hot spring. Returning to my room, I found dinner served by the waitress. The meal, using local produce, included warm dishes and a small, thick steak, all very satisfying. While enjoying my meal, the landlady came to check on me. I shared my appreciation, and she smiled, thanking me. Feeling somewhat better, I decided to share my day's experience with her. I avoided mentioning the hotel reservation but talked about the bus. The landlady listened sympathetically, without any criticism, showing concern for me. Feeling somewhat uplifted, I decided to share some stories about my everyday life. Talking about living with my wife and how she always has the upper hand, the landlady laughed a bit louder than before. "Mr. Smith, you say you're henpecked, but you speak so kindly. You must cherish your wife a lot. I'm sure she wishes for you to be more proactive," she remarked. After more pleasant conversation, she left the room. I then went for a walk outside, thinking it would be a good post-dinner exercise. The night breeze felt pleasant. It was quiet with few people around, creating a serene atmosphere. I came across a park and decided to sit on a bench there. While sitting, I reflected on recent events and the conversation I had with the landlady earlier. Suddenly, I sensed someone's presence and turned around to find Mr. Johnson, the company president, behind me. Mr. Johnson, noticing me, approached with his carry-on luggage. Originally, he was on a business trip and planned to join us afterward. Mr. Johnson and I sat on the bench and had a long, relaxed conversation. We reminisced fondly as our conversation flowed naturally. Mr. Johnson had a habit of going to a secluded park to think whenever he faced troubles. I had a similar habit, and once we had coincidentally met in the same park. Back then, I casually listened to his worries and made an offhand comment. It was something I said without much thought, but it turned out to be a word of salvation for Mr. Johnson, helping him resolve his dilemma. There was this new employee who had approached a client company for a business deal but had done so without sufficient sales preparation. Apparently, he used some inappropriate language during the visit, which upset the person in charge at the client's end. I wondered why a new employee was sent alone on such an important task. The client, a significant corporation, even considered terminating their contract with us, a concern that reached Mr. Johnson. Though Mr. Johnson was guiding the internal team and strategizing for the future, he hadn't found a satisfactory solution. Around that time, I was dealing with my own issues and often went for night walks. It usually lasts about 30 minutes, so my wife wasn't overly worried. One evening, while sitting on a bench in a nearby park, I recognized a familiar face on the next bench. It was Mr. Johnson. We were both surprised to meet each other unexpectedly, as we lived nearby but were unaware of it. Our expressions conveyed mutual understanding of each other's troubles. When I initiated the conversation with Mr. Johnson, he shared the problem about the new employee. I voiced my thoughts, though I can't recall exactly what I said. But it resonated with Mr. Johnson, and fortunately, the situation improved afterward. This shared habit and past experience remained a secret between us, never discussed with anyone else. It had been a while since Mr. Johnson and I had time to talk, so this encounter was a pleasant surprise. As the night deepened, Mr. Johnson prepared to head back to the hotel. Noticing me walking in a different direction, he called out that I am going the wrong way. But I informed him that I was staying at a different hotel. Upon hearing my story, Mr. Johnson became furious, questioning why such a thing happened and what Michael was thinking. He immediately called Michael, demanding he come to us right away. When a pale-faced Michael arrived, Mr. Johnson reprimanded him sternly. He continued, expressing that the company's achievements that Michael had praised during his interview were all thanks to me, and it was unacceptable to treat someone like me with such disregard. After sending Michael home, Mr. Johnson offered to have me stay at the original hotel. However, I chose to return to the inn, where the landlady and staff had treated me well. Mr. Johnson smiled at my decision, saying it was typical of me, and headed to the hotel. After the trip, Michael was demoted. To reforge his character, he was sent to work at a partner company known for its strict management, where he was subjected to a dormitory life and strict discipline from the matron. Though it was sad to imagine a grown man being disciplined, I couldn't help but feel it was necessary. Later, Mr. Johnson appointed me as the leader of a new project. Although I have been content with a supporting role, I accepted the leadership position, inspired by Mr. Johnson and the landlady's words. The project turned out to be a great success. Enjoying the experience of leading, I became open to more challenges. My wife noticed the change in me, complimenting my happier demeanor. We even visited the inn together, where the landlady welcomed us warmly, much to my wife's delight. With both my work and personal life flourishing, I resolved to continue striving for happiness. I have a daughter. Her name is Lisa. I met a woman of my age at work when I was 35. Her name was Emily, and we got married. She was a widow and had a child. She had lost her husband to illness. At that time, Lisa was only 6 years old. Lisa, this is your new dad. Nice to meet you, Lisa. Nice to meet you too. Without looking up and making eye contact with me, she answered in a small voice. It seemed Lisa was very attached to her deceased father. I heard she was adored by him as she was an only child. So Lisa wouldn't warm up to me even after her mother and I got married. Even when I offered to play with her, it didn't go well. Lisa, I will read you a storybook. No. Saying so, she would run into her bedroom. I took Lisa on trips and to amusement parks, but she still wouldn't talk to me. It was understandable that she couldn't get used to the idea of a stranger, like myself, suddenly becoming her new dad. But still, it made me sad we couldn't bond at all. Emily said she'll open up to you someday, but that didn't happen. Lisa never called me dad. When I married Emily, I vowed to myself that I would love her daughter as my own. I believed that she would eventually understand my feelings. Lisa was very studious, especially diligent about the things she was interested in. She had an interest especially in acting. At her request, we found her a theatrical troupe to join. She was only 10 years old when she started acting, but her dedication to practice was impressive. She was inspired by a play she saw in elementary school and wanted to be on stage herself. I know I was an overly proud parent, but even I could tell Lisa was a good actor. Whenever I heard Lisa was performing, Emily and I went to see her play. After the play, I praised her as much as I could, and the three of us went out for a nice meal. Lisa, your performance was wonderful. I was so moved at that particular scene that I couldn't help crying. Yeah. No matter how much I praised her, her responses were always indifferent. She would often say, yeah, or I see, but that didn't bother me at all. I just hoped she would open up bit by bit. Years passed. However, even as a teenager, Lisa still wouldn't call me dad. It was around this time that Emily started acting strangely. I first noticed it when I bumped into our next-door neighbor, Sophia, in the elevator of our apartment building. "Good morning. Are you off to work today? You know, we're not as well off as your family is. I see your wife always leaves in the early afternoon, dressed up nicely. Maybe she's going for a fancy lunch." I don't know. That night, I mentioned this to Emily, and she looked guilty for some reason. After that, she started avoiding me. She started coming home late under the pretext of doing overtime, and always smelt of alcohol. She wouldn't listen to my concerns, and I realized she had changed a lot. Lisa, meanwhile, continued to focus on her theater practice, ignoring her mother's behavior. When Lisa turned 15, Emily suddenly told me that she wanted a divorce. Apparently, she was attracted to someone at her workplace. I had sensed she didn't have feelings for me anymore. Staying together in such a state was only painful for both of us. In fact, I didn't even want to live with someone who was so selfish. I said, "I understand," and we both agreed to end our marriage amicably. Even though I knew the answer, I asked Lisa anyway, "Who do you want to live with, Mom or myself?" Without hesitation, she said, "Mom." Long story short, Emily and Lisa left, and I later heard Emily remarried. I wondered what my life was all about and felt like a complete failure as a husband and father. I spent my days blaming myself for everything that had happened. But after a year or so, the emotional pain of divorce subsided, and surprisingly I found myself recovering from it. Time was indeed a healer. A decade flew by, and I lost contact with Emily and became estranged from Lisa. I lived a simple life, not getting deeply involved with women. Being single wasn't so bad. I consoled myself with such thoughts. One day, I happened to see something totally unexpected. Coming home after working overtime, I just wanted to relax. I was watching TV, having a few beers. A play by a theater troupe was broadcasted. I used to go and watch plays. And I thought of Lisa. I wondered how she was doing. I wasn't really concentrating on what was on TV when a woman who looked like Lisa suddenly appeared on the show. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Is that Lisa?" After the play ended, I watched the credits roll. Among the names of the performers was Lisa Smith. The surname Smith must be Emily's latest husband's. I had mixed feelings. Lisa on TV had grown into such a beautiful woman. She must have worked so hard for her dreams. Seeing her again, even on TV, made me very happy. Curious about Lisa, I looked her up on the internet, something I never thought of doing. I found out she was very active on a video streaming site. Lisa, busy with her theater group, still managed to find time to update her videos daily. I remembered how hard-working she had always been. Since then, I started watching her videos every day without fail. Her videos were about her daily life and small talks and such. She didn't have many fans, but I noticed some dedicated ones were commenting daily. I was surprised at how worried I felt. Considering I was no longer her parent, I had to laugh at myself. Some time after I started watching her videos, Lisa posted a video titled, "Something I Want to Say." Something was telling me this was completely different from her usual content. I played the video. It wasn't the usual Lisa there, but she looked rather serious. She began with, "There's something I regret." Then, with a sincere look, she continued, "When I was 6, my mom remarried, and I got a new dad. He loved me unconditionally, but back then, I couldn't forget my real dad, who passed away when I was very little, and couldn't open up to this new dad. I never even called him dad. Despite all his efforts for me, I never said thank you to him. I must have been a bad daughter. He supported my acting so much." Watching the video, I said, "That wasn't even your fault," and found myself crying. I couldn't stop crying as I stared at my stepdaughter on the screen. Without thinking, I wrote in the comments, "I'm sure your stepdad will be happy seeing you succeed and be very proud of you." After watching this video, my desire to see her grew. A month later, I found out Lisa's theater group was performing at a concert hall in the city. I can finally get to see Lisa. That was what I thought. I took a day off from work just to get her ticket for Lisa's play. As soon as I got my ticket, I came home and marked the day on a calendar with a big circle. As the day of her performance approached, I found myself feeling strangely nervous. And I didn't know why. On the opening day, I left home early and headed to the venue. There weren't many people in the audience. I chose a seat on the side of the stage, worried about being recognized by Lisa. It had been 10 years. She probably wouldn't even remember my face. Yet, I still wondered what I would do if she noticed me. I waited for the play to start, my heart racing. It had been a long time since I felt this tense. The curtain rose, and the play began. Lisa wasn't the lead, but her role had quite a few lines. I thought, as a proud father, that her acting was the best among all the performers. Just watching her performance, I started crying, not sobbing or anything, but the tears started falling. At some stage, I thought our eyes met for a second, but it might have been my imagination. After the play ended, I went to the reception, intended to leave a bouquet of flowers for Lisa. After spoken to the receptionist and turned around, I saw Lisa standing there. I got so nervous I was unable to speak for a while. Finally, I managed to say, "Hey, long time no see, you were amazing." Lisa smiled and said, "You came. Thank you. I just happened to find out your troupe was performing." I stumbled over my words nervously. We stood there, smiling at each other, speechless. Then, someone from her troupe called her from afar, and she replied loudly, "I'll be right there." Lisa then asked, "If you have time, can we talk a bit? Could you wait for me?" "Of course," I replied. About 20 minutes later, Lisa came back with her belongings, holding the bouquet I had given her. She looked extremely happy. We walked to a nearby cafe. After some trivial conversation, as we started to feel more comfortable, Lisa began to speak. Looking down, I grew concerned at her sad expression and asked, "What's wrong?" Lisa shared bits about her life after Emily and I divorced. It seemed things didn't go well between her and her new stepfather. Also, after Emily remarried and had a baby son, she focused solely on him, neglected Lisa. Lisa left home as soon as she graduated high school and cut all her ties with her family. It was heartbreaking, and the tears spilled out of my eyes. "Must have been very hard for you. I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you," Lisa said. "I'm sure I deserved it. Even though you raised me for several years, I never said thank you," she muttered through tears. Hearing this, I said to her, "Don't blame yourself. I was truly happy seeing you succeed. I am very proud of you." I realized I was repeating the same words I wrote in her video comment. Lisa looked surprised, then smiled. "I still think of you as my daughter, Lisa. It doesn't matter to me that we're not biologically related. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask me. I'll do anything I can to help you." For some reason, I felt a bit embarrassed after saying that. Lisa looked delighted and said, "Thank you, Dad." From then on, I've never missed any of her performances. Sometime afterwards, Lisa got engaged and introduced her fiancé to me. "Dad, this is Steve. Steve, this is my dad. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too." Steve was a senior member of her troupe and seemed like a fine young man. He said he fell for Lisa, seeing her giving 100% in everything she did. I thought he was truly a right man for her. All three of us started going out for drinks, and it felt as if I suddenly became a father of 2 children. I heard Emily, my ex-wife, was having troubles with her current husband. She was caught having an affair. She brought it on herself, though. "You're my only dad," Lisa said to me, as she handed me my lunch she made. Lisa looked me in the eye and smiled warmly. From now on, I will always want to be there for Lisa, protecting her as a father. Seriously, how long are you planning to stay at the headquarters? You don't even have a desk and just run around the office. There's no place for a high school grad like you here. When I opened the door to the CEO's office, I was surprised to find Amy, the department head, sitting in the absent CEO's chair with an air of arrogance. She graduated from Harvard and always looked down on me, flaunting her education. "No, Amy, the chair you're sitting in is actually mine." "What? Are you talking nonsense? Have you gone crazy from not fitting in at the headquarters?" "No, I mean it. The chair you're sitting in, the CEO's chair, is mine. Can you move out of the way?" After this, she is left slumped on the floor of the CEO's office when she discovers the truth. Her life was about to hit rock bottom. My name is Kevin Johnson. I was raised by a single mother after my parents divorced shortly after I was born. Their separation wasn't due to a bitter fight, but more because of differing values, so our relationship wasn't too strained. Even after the divorce, my dad continued to pay child support and we met regularly. He was a hard-working man and started talking to me about his job when I entered middle school. Eating the slightly fancy meals he treated me to, I thought to myself as a child that a lot of things can happen in a company. That also sparked my interest in joining the workforce. Gradually, I began to consult my dad about life's decisions. He was like a reliable figure, watching over me from a distance. After graduating high school, I joined a trading company. I consulted my dad about whether to go to college. I didn't have a specific field I wanted to study at that time. When I discussed this with my dad, he advised me to start working first. He had worked after middle school, experienced various jobs, and only then went to college. You'll only understand the real enjoyment of college after working and realizing what you need and what studies will enhance your skills, he advised. Besides, college tuition isn't cheap. It would be a waste to go without a clear goal. He generously offered to pay for my college if I ever decided to go, so I chose to enter the workforce first. I was assigned to a local branch of the trading company, which had a great atmosphere. The branch office had a great atmosphere, and although I had to work late every day to complete unfamiliar tasks, I never had any difficulties with relationships at all. Being in my teens with plenty of energy, over time felt like being in a club activity and wasn't too hard. Every day was stimulating, full of new things to learn and understand. I felt grateful for following my dad's advice, thinking I might have just drifted along in college. As I worked, I found one thing after another that I wanted to learn. For instance, our company often dealt with overseas transactions. This made me want to learn more French, or even other languages such as Spanish or Chinese. Although I was in sales and not heavily involved in overall company management, I aspired to understand the financial statements of our company and those of our clients. This interest led me to contemplate studying accounting and business management. Whenever work ended early, I spent time reading introductory books I bought from bookstores. During those fulfilling days, I reached my 6th year in the workforce. That year, a new female employee joined the company. Her name was Amy. Apparently, she was a returnee from abroad and had graduated from Harvard University. Moreover, her parents were a diplomat and a translator. Naturally, she was a bilingual, indispensable for our trading company. She was what you'd call a well-educated lady from a privileged background. Amy was as competent as the rumors had suggested, but she always seemed in a hurry, as if under pressure. It was like she had unknowingly labeled herself as someone who must excel. She was apparently polite to the employees around her, but I was a little wary because I felt that there was something hidden somewhere in her tone of voice that was condescending to them. My caution proved right when Amy's attitude towards me changed drastically one day. It was the day she learned I was from a single-parent family and only a high school graduate. Suddenly, her eyes turned cold, and she said, "Oh, you are from a single-parent family and just a high school grad. How did you even get into this company? Was it through connections or something?" Despite being from Harvard and bilingual, Amy was still a junior colleague to me. I didn't want to lose my temper with her, so I brushed off her remarks and let it slide, though I was surprised she dared to say that to me. After that incident, Amy's language skills and negotiation prowess were recognized, and she was soon transferred to the headquarters. Of course, she didn't leave a good impression on me, but she probably didn't care. Once Amy moved to the headquarters, peace returned to the branch where I worked. I enjoyed my daily work in a good environment. By this time, I had gotten used to my job, and my overtime hours had decreased. I was thinking about going to a university, maybe through online courses or night classes, while continuing to work. So, I kept turning down offers to transfer to the headquarters. However, around my 10th year with the company, I could no longer refuse the transfer to headquarters. Saying goodbye to everyone at the branch who had nurtured me for 10 years, I got a bit emotional recalling a good and tough time since my high school graduation. Everyone at the branch was crying too, making me realize how great the environment had been. After the farewell party at the branch, on the day before my transfer, I had dinner with my father. He had lost quite a bit of weight since I last saw him. He wasn't suffering from any serious illness, but his aging worried me. Then, my father made a request, but I'll talk about that later. The next day, my first day at the headquarters, started with greeting rounds. I went through a number of departments throughout the head office and got to know everyone. Finally, though reluctantly, I went to greet Amy, who had become a department head. Well, you've come to headquarters. What can a high school grad from a single-parent family even do here? Come on, Amy, please go easy on me. Well, do your best, I suppose. Amy had become even more prickly over the nearly 10 years we hadn't met. Despite the struggles of working in a male-dominated company, looking down on others is not cool. I sighed. What bothered me about Amy was her tendency to belittle others based on things that were not of a person's nature, like being a high school grad or from a single-parent family. Amy didn't see who I really was. She didn't care of my 10 years of hard work and what I had learned in this company. Fortunately, I worked in a special department, so I didn't have to see Amy often, but whenever we met at meetings, she would find some way to prod at me. "Oh, Kevin, there you are. Did you even understand today's meeting, being a high school grad?" Yes, I did, obviously. Besides, I was the one who prepared today's meeting materials. Kevin, are you still at headquarters? I thought you would have gone back to the branch by now, or perhaps unassigned to a subsidiary. No, I came to headquarters for a mission. I wouldn't just go back to the branch so easily. I never talked back in reality, but I always had a retort in my mind. One day, I had to visit Amy's department for some work. "Emily, what is this translation? We can send such a document to our clients." "I'm sorry, Amy. It's my first time preparing a document in French." Amy was scolding a female employee in her department, making her kneel on the floor. "Amy, this is too much." I hurried over and helped the kneeling employee stand up. "Kneeling is not okay. Look, she's about to cry." When I reprimanded Amy, she snatched the documents I was about to hand her. "It's her incompetence that's the problem," she said angrily, tossing the documents onto her desk. "Thank you." The scolded employee thanked me, but Amy just returned to her desk without a glance at us. The rest of the department was working uneasily, watching Amy's mood. The atmosphere was far from pleasant. "Don't yell too much, okay?" I warned Amy, but she just shrugged her shoulders. It was about half a year into my days of running around the headquarters. I was called to the CEO's office and adjusted my tie, thinking the time has finally come. I did a full body check in the restroom, polished my shoes, took a deep breath, and headed to the CEO's office. When I opened the door, there was Amy, sitting arrogantly in a chair. "Amy, what are you doing here?" "Aha, Kevin, what brings you here?" "Well, I was called by the CEO. What about you, Amy? By the way, how long are you going to be at the headquarters? You're just running around without a desk. A high school grad like you doesn't belong here." "No, the chair you are sitting in, that's my chair." "What? Are you talking nonsense? Have you gone crazy because you don't fit in here?" "No, I mean the chair you're sitting in, that's my chair. The executive vice president's chair. Can you move?" You're not the executive vice president. What are you talking about?" Just then, the CEO walked in. "Amy, what are you doing playing around here? Do you have business with Kevin, the executive vice president?" "Mr. Wilson, the CEO. Kevin is really the executive vice president. Not just the executive vice president from today. Kevin is the CEO." Mr. Wilson, the former CEO and now chairman, slowly said this. "Yes. I was transferred here half a year ago as an executive vice president. And today, I was called to the CEO's office to receive my appointment as CEO. Moreover, Mr. Wilson is my father. Although we have different last names due to my parents' divorce, he is undoubtedly my father. He started this company while my mother was pregnant with me. He even secretly set up the company and started attending college without consulting my mother. After I was born, he focused solely on work and college, neglecting family and parenting. My mother, frustrated by his lack of communication and involvement, filed for divorce. Since the divorce, my father has dedicated himself to work, but recently his health has been declining. Thankfully, no major illness has been found, but years of overworking have led to minor health issues. He decided it was time to step back and wanted to hand over his company to me. That's why I've been so busy at headquarters for the last 6 months, preparing to take over as CEO. I had always planned to eventually take over as CEO, so I was somewhat prepared. My initial assignment to the branch office was to ensure I was familiar with its operations before becoming CEO. "Amy, there should be a company-wide email about the announcement. Check it." A notification sound chimed. I prompted Amy to check her email. The email announced Mr. Wilson's resignation as CEO and his new role as chairman, my promotion from executive vice president to CEO, and also Amy's assignment to a subsidiary. Amy is indeed capable, but her attitude towards her subordinates has garnered poor reviews. Apart from making an employee kneel, there have been various complaints about her behavior. When I prompted Amy to read the email, she seemed to understand everything. That I was also the president's apprentice, working on internal investigations. That she had continued to belittle me. That she had yelled at her subordinate in front of me, the next CEO. She collapsed on the spot and couldn't move for a while. Then, a woman's voice said, "Sorry I'm late." And in came Emily. She was the female employee Amy had scolded into kneeling the other day. Emily had worked for one of our client companies but resigned last month. Mr. Wilson, our CEO, had noticed her detailed attentiveness and clear documentation as a sales assistant and headhunted her when she decided to quit. Having lost her parents early, Emily had been involved in various jobs since graduating middle school. She was working at a restaurant when she was headhunted by her previous company's president. Despite excelling in secretarial and reception duties, and as a sales assistant, rumors circulated that she might be the president's mistress due to the nature of her recruitment. Nevertheless, she bravely handled her tasks until she was falsely accused of misconduct and resigned last month, fed up. Emily was apprehensive about joining our company, worried about facing hostility again, but Mr. Wilson persuaded her, promising a better experience. Emily was set to become my secretary starting today. Amy, still sitting on the floor, glared at Emily and then left the office. It must have been hard for her, but her harsh treatment of subordinates as a manager warranted her transfer. She didn't make any excuses, likely understanding her own mistakes. Years passed since I became the CEO and my father became the chairman. Initially, I was anxious about how things would go, but thanks to my father, Emily, and our employees' support, we've managed to maintain our performance. It's not just about maintaining, but I'd like to improve our performance. However, sustaining it for the first few years is an achievement worth acknowledging. Emily has been a great help in her secretarial duties. Emily's knack for anticipating needs, evident from how she was favored by her previous CEO, is now indispensable for me. I hardly manage business trips without her. Speaking of which, I recalled Amy from the subsidiary. Initially, she struggled with a bad reputation there too, but eventually, her reputation began to improve. Curious about how she had changed, I called her back. To my surprise, she had transformed into a pleasant woman, as if a burden had been lifted off her. The condescending attitude and patronizing manner that had marred her charm were completely gone. Moreover, her sharp intellect, honed at Harvard, remained intact. She started receiving praise from colleagues and no longer attracted any negative feedback. Feeling confident about her transformation, I promoted her to a department manager. Some time after her promotion, I randomly encountered her at a diner during lunch break. Mr. Johnson, instead of being resentful, Amy graciously offered me a seat opposite her. Amy, you've really improved at work. Everyone is grateful. No, I'm embarrassed. How can I apologize for my disrespect towards you? No need to apologize. Who you are now is what matters. I was always trying too hard. I know it sounds like an excuse, but my mother was a high school graduate. She was half Mexican, working in a pub where she met my father and got married. My father always ridiculed her for her education. Watching that, I vowed not to become like my mother. I thought not going to college was the worst thing. Desperate to add to my educational qualifications, I studied hard and got into Harvard, but I was an underachiever there, which only made me more obsessed with my education. Here, even as an underachiever, graduating from Harvard earned me admiration, which I enjoyed. Amy started talking as I settled down, eating my lunch and listening quietly. I'm grateful you sent me to the subsidiary. My mother, living near it, had separated from my dad after I graduated. While at the subsidiary, I lived with my mother. She hadn't divorced but had a relieved expressions in separating from my dad. I asked her things I never could before, like if she regretted not going to college or not wanting more education. She said she had no regrets. She enjoys her translation work now, even without a college degree. In fact, she regretted marrying my dad, who belittled her for her education. Amy continued to talk, even as her lunch cooled. I might have been a bit envious of you. I saw my mother being ridiculed and got too caught up in education. Despite struggling at Harvard, which I had worked so hard to get into, I couldn't leave because of its prestige and finally graduated. Yet you, despite being so capable, didn't go to college and even considered online courses when work settled down, which seemed so relaxed to me. I couldn't understand it. It was frustrating and enviable. That's why I maintained such a rude attitude towards you. Looking back, it seems nonsensical and unjust, but back then, I was desperate to uphold myself. Education was everything, and I couldn't comprehend someone like you who thought differently. I'm truly sorry for that. Look at me, I said. Amy was crying. I had no idea you had such a traumatic experience, Amy. I always thought you walked a sunny path of elite success. Before I knew it, I was engrossed in Amy's story, setting aside my meal. It's true that appearances can be deceiving, and I felt sorry for Amy, who had been so constrained by her education. The changed Amy diligently accumulated achievements for the company and carefully nurtured her subordinates. Recognizing her efforts, I promoted her from department manager to executive vice president. She's now an indispensable member of the team for me. Of course, Emily is also working hard as my secretary. She's attentive, meticulous in her work, and I rely heavily on her. Now, Amy and Emily occasionally clash over work strategies, but they generally maintain a good relationship. After learning that people tend to speak their minds more freely during meals, I make a point of having lunch with not just Amy, but also Emily. My father, now the chairman, teases me saying, "You sure are popular with the ladies," but it's not about that. It's purely about understanding my subordinates' honest opinions to facilitate smooth operations. Speaking of which, my parents have been dining together more often since I transferred to the headquarters. My mother initially complained, "What now, after all this time?" But she seems fulfilled knowing my father has always cared for us, and my appointment as CEO perhaps filled a void for her. Lately, she's even started saying, maybe I could remarry that man again. As for myself, I've decided to start attending university through online program this spring. Now that I'm more accustomed to the role of CEO and clearly see my areas for improvement, I believe university will be very rewarding. Hearing this, Emily asked if she could also enroll in an online high school course. My answer was, of course, yes. Age doesn't matter when it comes to learning. There's always a time in everyone's life when it's the right moment to learn. For Emily and me, that time is now. I jokingly asked Amy, "Why don't you go back to college too?" She declined, saying, "I don't want to lose Harvard as my final alma mater. But if she ever wants to learn more, I think she should go back to college, even as a non-degree student. We can all educate ourselves at any age. It's about receiving education when it's needed." With these thoughts, I'm about to welcome my first spring as a university freshman. Trying to get away with such a ridiculous lie. When will you stop living in a student's fantasy world? After rescuing a beautiful girl, I missed my company's new employee orientation. When I explained the situation to the company's president, Mr. Smith, he refused to listen to my explanation and assumed that it was a lie. Then he mocked me. Sure, it sounds like something out of a comic book, but a little fact-checking wouldn't hurt, right? A trash who chooses a girl over the company isn't needed. You're fired. No matter how much I explained, he wouldn't believe me, and eventually, I was fired. My career ended on the first day I was supposed to start working. As I was devastated and in despair, the HR manager, Kevin, burst into the office with a panicked look. "My name is Brandon. I'm a guy who just graduated from college not long ago. College life was, well, enjoyable, but I felt like doing the bare minimum. I only made a few friends in college and didn't join any clubs or sports teams. I've never had a girlfriend in my life. I just watched other bright and happy students with envy. I'm convinced I was a shadowy presence. Why am I so gloomy?" One day, while riding the train, I pondered over this. In elementary school, I seemed like a normal, cheerful kid. I used to run around the playground with friends during breaks and hang out at friends' houses after school, playing games and had a great time. I remember getting excited about sports days and other events. Perhaps I was happy and fulfilled back then. My middle school years. From 6th to 8th grader, I felt like I spent less and less time with friends. I was still obsessed with games in middle school, and as my classmates began to shift their interest to fashion and music, We had less in common. I even went against the trends on purpose. Still, there were friends from the same elementary school and middle school. There were a few, but I had gaming buddies. My social circle started narrowing around this time, I guess. In high school, my social circle became even smaller. My middle school gaming friends went to different high schools, and we only occasionally talked or chatted while playing games. Spending more time alone playing games, my social circle shrunk even more. I got caught in this negative cycle during this period. Eventually, even talking to people became a hassle for me. I did work part-time, but spending money on branded items or concerts of popular artists seemed silly. After all, I had no interest in anything but games. In college, my loneliness accelerated. My gaming friends got jobs, and we couldn't find time to meet, so I spent more time alone. I met a few unsociable people like me in the group activities or lectures, but only a handful. While others enjoyed their vibrant campus life, I spent 4 years quietly in the background. Thinking about it, it all makes sense. I was too preoccupied with games to join in with my classmates. I didn't try to keep up with their topics. As a result, my social circle became limited, and that's why my gloomy personality formed. So, it's a case of poetic justice. Do good and good will come to you. Do bad and bad will come to you. So, if you do nothing, it's only natural that nothing comes back to you. I couldn't make friends because I didn't try to. Indeed, it's a well-coined phrase. Listening to the train's clatter, I simultaneously admired the phrase and despised myself. Without any change, I was already 22 years old. As I was about to start my career, I wondered if I could change my gloomy self. Then, strangely, I started to feel excited about it. The only bright spot in my life was getting an offer from Company A. Company A is a small electronics manufacturer. I first encountered their products in high school and have been impressed with their quality and design ever since. I literally jumped for joy when I received a job offer from them. No exaggeration. Today, the new employee orientation of Company A is going to be held. I will make a fresh start, and as a member of society, I will abandon the dark, naysaying, pathetic self I have been. Let's be reborn anew. With that resolution, I left home this morning. The venue is in a hall in the city, not too big since it's not a mega-rich company. I had everything ready from the night before, but I got a bit rushed leaving and will arrive just in time. I'm not going to be late, so it should be fine. That's what I thought, but I got scared because I couldn't see anyone else dressed like me. Maybe I'm heading to the wrong place. Maybe I got the date and time wrong. That's the anxiety that crossed my mind. Once I get off the train, I have to walk to the hall. The station was more crowded than I expected, and now I'm worried about making it on time. Being late to the new employee orientation would be incredibly disrespectful. I checked my phone's map app for the quickest route and hurried along. Is this really the right way? I muttered involuntarily. The route took me far from the main streets, through winding back alleys that made me doubt its accuracy. It was oddly quiet. The hustle and bustle of the city felt far away. It was a strange path. What if I'm late? As I anxiously followed the route guidance, I heard a scream from somewhere. Stop it. It was a woman's voice. Not quite mature, but not a child either. Maybe around my age. What's that? It was a tone of voice you would never heard in usual life, and I instinctively froze. Stop it, I said. Shut up, you little brat. The voices were coming from the next street over. It could be serious trouble. I pressed myself against a wall and peered around the corner, apprehensively. No, let me go. It was clearly a case. A woman was being dragged by a man with his face covered by a mask. She had visible injuries on her arm, and her obviously expensive clothes were partially damaged. Well, she's beautiful. No, more like a beautiful girl. I was momentarily mesmerized, but the scream brought me back to reality. Stop it! I hid myself, scared, but the beautiful girl was being taken into a building. My heart was pounding as if I had run a full marathon. What should I do? Call the police? I asked myself, but quickly realized it was pointless. Even if I called them now, that beautiful girl would not be able to withstand until the police come. She would definitely suffer something terrible first. Muster the courage to save her, or pretend I didn't see anything and run away. I had two choices. I cannot do it. There's nothing I can do. That's right. If I butt in, it won't make any difference. I should run away and then report to the police. That's what I thought, and I took a step forward. Let me go, I said. Don't you try to run away. I stopped in my tracks. Don't run away. Of course, those words weren't meant for me, but they stuck in my mind and wouldn't fade away. Don't run away. Muttering this, I remembered my resolution to discard my weak and pathetic self. All right, I'll do it. Recklessly, I sprang out in front of the man and the beautiful girl. Stop it! I charged at the man, screaming. Maybe because it was so sudden, he couldn't dodge. He flew through the air and plunged headfirst into a nearby dumpster. Let's get out of here. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed the girl's hand and started running towards the station. Trying to keep out of sight from him, I led her by the hand and went into the station. Looks like we're safe. He doesn't seem to be following us. Since the man was up to no good, he probably avoided actions that would draw public attention. This gave me some relief. Thank you so much. You really saved me. Thank you. She kept thanking me profusely as we caught our breath from running. Tears were in her eyes. She must have been really scared. Oh, excuse me, your hand. I realized I had been holding her hand since we had started running and quickly let go. I had never been with a girl, let alone held hands with one. Even though it was unintentional, I felt my face getting hot. If you'd like, I can walk you home. That guy might follow us. Sorry to get you into trouble. I'm so sorry. She kept apologizing as I asked her for the nearest station, and after 2 transfers, we arrived. She didn't seem to know much about how to take and change the trains. With her fancy attire, maybe she's some kind of rich girl. I asked for her address and followed the route on my cell phone for about 10 minutes from the station. We arrived at a huge, lavish mansion. To someone like me, living in a tiny, shabby apartment, it looked like a royal palace. Dad, a portly man with a beard, was standing at the gate. As soon as she saw him, the girl ran to him. Ava, I was so worried. I'm glad you're safe. So her name is Ava. She jumped into her dad's arms, crying. Right, Dad, I was about to be kidnapped, but this man saved me. After a joyous hug and kiss, Ava said this and gestured towards me with her right hand. Her dad looked at me and said, "Oh, is that so? My daughter was in your care. I'd like to thank you properly. How about joining us for dinner?" "No, it's nothing." Suddenly, I remembered about the orientation. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt my back freeze. My watch pointed to the time the orientation had already started. I have a prior commitment. Excuse me. I took off my suit jacket because it was getting hot and carried it under my arm as I ran toward the station. Hey, you. Just a few steps away, Ava's dad called out to me. I turned around, thinking what it could be, and saw him holding a shiny black object in his hand. You dropped your pen. Thank you so much. It was my pen. A gift from Company A when I got the job offer. It was elegant, black with the company name engraved in gold. Goodbye. I took the pen, threw it into my bag, and started running again. Should I have at least told them my name? When I arrived at the orientation venue, it had already finished. Wondering what to do, I wandered around and came across a luxury car in the parking lot. The car stopped right in front of me, and the driver's side window rolled down. "Oh, it's you," the driver said, looking puzzled. It was Kevin, the HR manager, I suppose. I remembered meeting him at the interview. "Sorry, my name is Brandon, a new employee. I'm sorry for being late to the orientation. I just got here." "Is that so? Well, what to do?" Kevin seemed more amiable and during the interview. He is considering my situation despite my unexcused absence. Suddenly, I heard a voice from the back seat. "It's fine, Kevin." Then the rear window began to roll down. "Brandon," I was surprised. Sitting in the back was Mr. Smith. He is the president of Company A. I had been fascinated by the company's products and knew his face and name well because I had thoroughly checked their website and brochures. "The orientation's over for today. Be at the office by 8 a.m. tomorrow, okay?" "Yes, I understand. I'm very sorry." I apologized to Mr. Smith, but he started rolling up the window midway. Naturally, it seemed I had made him angry. "Kevin, drive on." "But shouldn't we hear out his circumstances?" "Just go, I'm busy." I overheard the conversation between Mr. Smith and Kevin. Kevin looked helpless as he nodded to me and rolled up the window. I nodded in return, expressing my apology. Soon, the luxury car drove off into the road. Kevin looked down. I thought for a moment, but considering my own situation, I had no time to worry about others. I felt a sense of despair, or maybe emptiness. Anyway, I was incredibly worried about what would happen from tomorrow onwards. The next day, after the daily morning assembly at work, the instruction was given to the new employees in the office. "First, you all need to learn about our products. Here are some magazines related to our products. Please take one each." We were to read the magazine articles, learn from them, and compile a report with our thoughts and what we learned. This was the first task for all the new employees. "Once you've written it, bring it to me. If it's okay, spend the rest of the morning reading other articles." Everyone seemed to be struggling, but for me, it was an easy task. I already knew a lot about Company A's products, so it was simple. I could probably write the report without even reading the articles. However, I might discover something new, so I decided to skim through them. During the task, I heard yelling from the back of the office. I involuntarily looked in that direction. "What the hell are you doing?" The one shouting was Kevin. He was sitting in his chair, scolding 3 young female employees. He looked nothing like the Kevin I saw yesterday, almost like a different person with his scary expression. The women he was yelling at kept putting their heads down, with the tears welled up in their eyes. Suddenly, I remembered Ava from yesterday. She too had tearful eyes and put her head down, but it felt different from this. "Submit a corrective plan by today, understand?" "Yes." They responded, their voices trembling. Kevin gestured with his hand for them to leave, and they dispersed. At the same time, a colleague next to me nudged me with his elbow. I turned to him, and he whispered, "That's the guy from the interview, right?" "Yeah, Kevin." "He's really scary, isn't he?" "Yeah, he is." "Oh dear, no way." After saying that, he returned to reading his magazine. I secretly glanced at Kevin again, and he was sitting with his elbows on the desk, holding his head. I had just finished writing the report and was about to submit it. The office door banged open, and Mr. Smith appeared. Led by senior employees, everyone stood up. "Oh, it's you, Brandon. Come here for a moment." "Yes." I was led to Mr. Smith's office. The luxurious decor and comfortable-looking reception set caught my eye. "You know why you've been called here, don't you?" Mr. Smith sat on the desk, crossing his legs and arms, and began to speak to me. I understood very well why I had been called. It was a concern that kept me up last night. It's about my unexcused absence from yesterday's orientation. That's right. I'm truly sorry. I apologized sincerely. I tried hard to convey my deepest apologies. Eventually, Mr. Smith told me to stop it. "First, tell me the reason. It wasn't oversleeping, was it?" I hesitated a bit. The reason for my absence was like something out of a comic book. But I couldn't lie about it. I decided to be honest. I made up my mind to do so, denied the sleeping over theory, and then began to explain. I was rescuing someone. Rescuing someone. Yes, a young girl who was almost abducted. I encountered the incident in an alley near the venue and helped her escaping, then escorted her home. As I said this, Mr. Smith, still crossing his arms, looked at me with a serious face. After a while, his face began to crumble. Eventually, as if he couldn't hold it back anymore, he burst out laughing loudly. "What an amusing story, Brandon. You missed the ceremony because you were saving a girl from being kidnapped." "Yes." "That's hilarious. It's been a while since I laughed this much." Needless to say, his laughter was likely tinged with ridicule. After a good laugh, Mr. Smith returned to a serious expression. But though he seemed to be holding back more laughter, trying to get away with such a ridiculous lie, "When will you stop living in a student's fantasy world?" It's not a lie. Maybe I should have reported it right away, but it seemed harsh to be labeled a liar without any fact-checking. No matter how much I insisted it was true, he wouldn't listen. "Is this how you plan to conduct yourself as a professional? A trash who chooses a girl over the company isn't needed. You are fired." For a few seconds, I couldn't comprehend his words. When I did, my body shook and I broke out in a cold sweat. "Fired? That can't be." I said. "We don't need you. A liar like you will surely hold everyone back. Now, leave." My vision blurred with shock. I had finally joined my dream company, Company A, only to be fired. Well, maybe it was inevitable. I had meddled in something unnecessary. I resignedly accepted it and replied, "I got it." Just at that moment, the door to the Kevin's office suddenly banged open. "Hey, Sam." It was Kevin, looking quite flustered. His forehead was sweaty. It seemed like no trivial matter. "What's going on, Kevin?" Mr. Smith appeared annoyed at the intrusion. But Kevin was still not composed. "Watch the news, please." "The news?" Mr. Smith turned on the TV, visibly irked. A large screen TV came to life, showing a news program. The heiress of Company B. Hearing the news, Mr. Smith muttered weakly. "Apparently, the daughter of Company B has been missing since the day before yesterday." Company B is a fairly large company, well known enough to be recognizable to those who know a little bit about it. "Kevin, contact them immediately." Mr. Smith, finally grasping the situation, panicked along with Kevin. This was crucial because Company B was an essential business partner for Company A. Currently, for quality reasons, a specific material was exclusively purchased from Company B. In other words, if something happened to Company B, it would spell trouble for Company A too. Breaking news now. As this announcement came from TV, the three of us focused on the screen. It turned out that the missing heiress of Company B had been safely found yesterday, according to interviews with those involved. Safe? Such stress is poison to the body. Indeed it is. Mr. Smith and Kevin said this, as if they had narrow escapes. They must have felt significantly relieved. "What, Brandon, still here?" I told you were fired. Now leave immediately." "Oh." At Mr. Smith's words, Kevin expressed surprise. Why was he so surprised? He must know I skipped the orientation. "Thank you for everything." I offered a token greeting and dejectedly left Kevin's office. As we passed each other, Kevin murmured, "Fired," and looked like he had a bitter taste in his mouth. Right after I left Mr. Smith's office, a female office worker hurried in. She seemed to have something to tell Mr. Smith. "Mr. Smith, a guest has arrived." "A guest? I wasn't expecting anyone. Who is it and where are they from?" "Yes, it's Mr. Hamilton from Company B." I was surprised. "He is the president of Company B." I knew his name from the news just now. What incredible timing, but it's none of my business now. While my colleagues were finishing their reports, I was packing my things. The guy next to me asked, "What happened?" but I didn't feel like telling the truth. "Just a little issue," I said with a forced smile. Just as I was about to leave, I heard Mr. Smith's voice from the corridor. "You mean one of my employees?" Then I heard another familiar voice. "Yes, definitely someone from your company." As I looked towards the sound, the office door banged open again. Mr. Smith appeared, followed by a portly man with a beard. Our eyes met momentarily. "Oh, he's that man, the one carrying that bag." I remembered him. He was the man from the large mansion I visited yesterday, that girl's father. "That man, you say?" Mr. Smith was visibly shocked, struggling to find words. I was also struggling to grasp the situation. "Yes, I would very much like to speak with him." "All right, Brandon, come here." Smith beckoned me, and I was led to a reception room next to the office. Listening more closely, it turned out that the girl's father was Mr. Hamilton, the president of Company B. So, the heiress mentioned in the news was Ava, and unknowingly, I had been involved in her disappearance. "I heard from my daughter, Brandon. You were very brave," he said. "No, well," my heart was racing. What had I done? I had unwittingly become involved in a news-making incident due to a whim. I wasn't regretting it, but I was utterly bewildered. I couldn't talk about the incident as it was under investigation, but apparently, Ava was targeted for a kidnapping, presumably for ransom. And I had stumbled upon it, leading to this moment. "I look forward to your future achievements, Brandon." Mr. Hamilton said this with a hearty laugh. Mr. Smith also laughed along exaggeratedly. But how did they know I was at Company A? Right after that thought, I remembered dropping a commemorative pen Company A gave it to me in front of the mansion. Of course, they must have seen the company name engraved on it. "If there are people like Brandon at your company, I would certainly like to build a good relationship," Mr. Hamilton said. He is smiling as he shook hands with Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith was again smiling in an exaggerated manner. But I was still being fired. I hesitated to speak up, but since I was being fired anyway, I felt no need to respect Mr. Smith. "Well, let's just say it. I regret to inform you that I am resigning from the company today. I had a discussion with Mr. Smith just now." "You're resigning?" Mr. Hamilton asked in surprise. His eyes widening significantly, looking quite shocked, which made me feel sorry. Brandon, calm down. It was just a joke. No need to take it seriously," Mr. Smith said in a rushed and awkward attempt to backpedal. But I didn't listen. "Excuse me, but I will take my leave here, since I'm a trash who chose a girl over the company," I said, quoting Mr. Smith's words, and stood up. He tried to grab my hand to stop me, but he just barely missed. "Brandon," Mr. Hamilton called out to me. When I turned around, he gestured with his open palms, silently asking me to wait. "Mr. Smith, what does Brandon mean by what he just said?" Well, Mr. Smith was flustered and at a loss for words. So, I explained to Mr. Hamilton on his behalf about how yesterday was my orientation day, how I missed it because I was helping Ava, how I was told I'm fired for choosing a girl over the company. As I spoke, Mr. Hamilton's face turned increasingly red. "Mr. Smith, I'm so sorry. I had no idea his story was true, and that the girl was your daughter." Mr. Smith was now apologizing deeply to Mr. Hamilton. But Mr. Hamilton's anger didn't subside. "It's not because she's my daughter. I've never thought that you're such a heartless man. I'll take back what I said earlier. We will have to reconsider our dealings with your company. For Company B, losing a small company like A probably wouldn't matter much. But for Company A, losing business with Company B could be the end." Knowing this, Mr. Smith clung to Mr. Hamilton, but he was completely ignored. "Brandon, sorry for the delay, but let me introduce myself properly," Mr. Hamilton said, handing me his business card. "Company B, President, Paul Hamilton." On my second day as a new grad, I received an impressive business card. "I'm sorry, I'm just a new employee and don't have a business card yet." "Is that so? Then, may I have your phone number? I would like to thank you properly at a later date." "Certainly." Thinking it rude to refuse, I gave him my phone number. "Well, I must take my leave now, since I'm fired." "I'll be leaving too." We both left the reception room. Mr. Smith tried to reach out to us, but both Mr. Hamilton and I just gave him a cold look. Without saying a word, without extending a hand. He was crying uncontrollably, soaking the floor with his tears. It was a pitiful sight. In the hallway, I crossed paths with Kevin. He looked at me with a sad expression and slightly nodded. He's been a strange person since yesterday. While thinking this, I nodded back and left the company. A few days later, while lounging at home, I received a call. It was from Mr. Hamilton. "Hello, this is Brandon." "This is Paul Hamilton. Thank you for the other day." After some standard small talk, the conversation moved to the main topic. "To your house. Yes, I thought it would be nice to have dinner with you. My daughter also wants to properly thank you." I was surprised by the unexpected invitation. Recalling the grand mansion I had seen that day. The mansion in my memory might be somewhat glorified, but thinking of going there again made me nervous. "Yes, I'll come." "Good, we'll be expecting you." It felt awkward to be thanked, but respecting their wishes, I decided to visit their house. Upon arriving at the Hamilton residence, it was indeed a breathtakingly grand mansion. When I rang the bell and announced my name, a housekeeper came to greet me. I didn't feel out of place, but then I realized that having a housekeeper meant they're living in a completely different world from me. The hallway was adorned with numerous decorations, almost like a museum. Feeling intimidated, I followed the housekeeper until I saw Mr. Hamilton at the end of the corridor. "I've been waiting for you. Thank you for inviting me today." I was led to the living room, where the lavish interior struck me as even more opulent than the hallway. Having compared the hallway to a museum, I was at a loss for words to describe the living room. "Brandon, Ava." From the back of the room, Ava, dressed in a magnificent gown, appeared. She wasn't literally glowing, but she was dazzlingly beautiful. So elegant and stunning, the thought of having held her hand made my face heat up again. We had a splendid lunch. It was incredibly delicious, but as an ordinary person, I didn't even know the names of most dishes. "By the way, Brandon," Mr. Hamilton said. It sounded a bit more intimate than before. "Yes. What do you think of my daughter?" "What do you mean?" "I would very much like you to be my son-in-law." "A son-in-law?" "Oh, no way. A son-in-law?" "Dad, wait. Well, it was undoubtedly a happy proposition. but being the first time in my 22 years of life to hear such a thing, I could only laugh, unable to react otherwise. I'm still the same hesitant. Well, think about it. Yes, I will. I will definitely consider it positively. I thought that in my mind, and my face heated up again. I couldn't help but notice that Ava also seemed to be blushing. I stayed until dusk and then decided it was time to leave. Considering the time, I couldn't avoid the packed trains, which made me feel a bit depressed. As I was heading towards the gate, a luxurious car was parked outside. "Come on, Brandon, get in." Apparently, it was Mr. Hamilton's private driver, and he was offering to drive me home. I appreciated their warm hospitality, and thankfully accepted the kind offer. "Thank you for the meal. Come again any time. Ava will be waiting." As Mr. Hamilton said that, Ava, standing beside him, raised her hand slightly and smiled gently before speaking. "See you again, Brandon." That night, my heart raced until I fell asleep. A few days later, I received a call from Company A. Reluctantly, I answered. "Hello, this is Kevin from Company A." When I asked what he wanted, he said he had something to discuss and wanted me to come to the office the next day. Honestly, I didn't want to go. I think Company A's products are great, but as long as Mr. Smith is there, I have no desire to be part of their circle. "I'm sorry, but I was fired. Please, I really need to talk to you. This isn't something Mr. Smith is involved in." He insisted it was a personal request from him, not related to Mr. Smith. After several refusals, he persuaded me, and I reluctantly agreed to go. I had no hard feelings towards Kevin, after all. The next day, I arrived at 8 a.m. and attended the morning assembly. I could feel my former colleague's stares. "Now, Kevin, please continue." "Yes." Kevin stepped onto the stage. I noticed that Mr. Smith was nowhere to be seen. He usually sat by the stage, crossing his arms and legs. "Suddenly, I must apologize to all of you." He said this out of the blue and removed the microphone from the stand. "I'm truly sorry." His voice and look expressed his sincere apology. It was so unexpected that I couldn't comprehend what was happening. The employees were also confused and started murmuring. Kevin then explained the situation. "I have been terrible to all of you." It was surprising. He always seemed soft-spoken and humble. A kind person, I thought. That's why it felt so odd to see him yelling in the office. I've yelled, kicked desks and chairs, and used foul language. No matter how much I apologize, I can't shake off the shame. Apparently, he had been treated like a puppet by Mr. Smith. Kevin knew that such methods were not right. However, whenever it was discovered he wasn't following Mr. Smith's directions, he was inevitably docked pay. It was almost like being under surveillance. I have a family, a wife and children to support. I had no choice but to follow his orders, Kevin said through tears, explaining he had to keep quiet to avoid pay cuts. "I'm deeply sorry." He apologized again. He really seemed like a good person, just as I had thought. I just remembered his helpless face on the day of the orientation. The next day, holding his head in distress. The bitter expression on his face. The sad look when he lowered his head in the hallway. All these must have been his true feelings showing through. I thought to myself, this must be the result of his conscience showing its face while obeying Mr. Smith as I watched him on the stage. After the morning assembly, Kevin and other executives personally informed me that my dismissal had been revoked. Kevin in particular, when he spoke with me during the third round of interviews, recommended me for the position, saying that I would love to hire him. By the way, where is Mr. Smith? He hasn't been around this morning. I was okay with returning to Company A, but honestly, I had planned to refuse if he was still there. "Oh, that's not a problem." "Well, it is a problem in a way," Kevin responded. Apparently, more misfortune had befallen Mr. Smith on the day I was fired. There had been a whistleblower, and it came to light that Mr. Smith had been embezzling company funds. He was arrested a few days ago and had stepped down from his position by his own decision. Now someone else from the executives was serving as the president. "We want to change the company for the better and need your help to do that." With Mr. Smith gone, I accepted the revocation of my dismissal. A fresh start, I thought, recalling my determination on the morning of the orientation. A few months later, I was visiting Mr. Hamilton's house after work. I had been invited for dinner. I've been meeting them like this once a week. Ava and I had become an official couple, with her parents' approval, over the past few months. "Thank you so much for continuing business with our company," I said. "I can't just abandon a company where Brandon is," he chuckled. We chatted while dining with Ava, her father, and her mother. Ideally, I'd prefer a dinner alone with Ava, but she's still afraid to go out. Besides, I doubt I could satisfy Miss Ava with any place I choose. After dinner, we talked in her room for a while. She's incredibly charming, and I find it was hard to believe she chose someone like me. When leaving, they again offered a car ride. I waved goodbye to the three of them as the car started moving. Gazing out the window at the starry sky, I wondered if I had changed somewhat since becoming a new grad. At least, I've progressed enough to have a girlfriend. I made the choice not to run away and help her that day. That's why I have these connections now. Former President Mr. Smith lost everything by drowning in his greed. Which means it's a case of poetic justice. A well-coined phrase. I was impressed with the words. To ensure I don't lose what I've finally gained, I'll continue to make good choices. That's what I vowed, under the starry sky. My wife's name is Susan. We met in high school, and after dating for 10 years, we got married. Susan wasn't particularly the beauty queen type, but she had a cute smile and was a cheerful woman. Soon after we married, we were blessed with a daughter, whom we named Michelle. My wife was a devoted woman and had always supported me. At that time, my mother, who lived with us, was battling cancer, and Susan managed to take care of our child and my mom while working part-time. I wished she wouldn't overwork, but she continued to work to contribute to our finances. She would drop off Michelle at daycare, leave my mom with a visiting nurse, and then head to work. No matter how tired she was, she would always say it's better to eat healthy and would go grocery shopping to cook homemade meals. Whenever I had a day off, I helped with the housework, and when possible, I would take my mother to her medical appointments. This life continued for 3 years, until my mother passed away. After the funeral, Susan suddenly disappeared. This was when we were just starting to settle down. She had left a letter behind. The letter said, "I'm sorry, I want a divorce. Please don't look for me." She left with only the bare essentials. I don't know why she left. It was beyond my comprehension what had happened so suddenly. I called her cell phone immediately, but all I heard was a message saying the number was no longer in use. Could it be? Maybe she had run off with someone. That thought crossed my mind. But I couldn't believe that she would have an affair. The night before she disappeared, Susan said as usual, "I will always love you and Michelle." I was in total shock that she had suddenly vanished. If there was something so serious that she wanted a divorce, I would have wanted to talk it over. I couldn't believe that everything was going to end with just a letter. I was filled with a sense of frustration. I wondered if she was dissatisfied with something about me. I admit I took her devotion for granted. Because she was always there with a smile, I never realized she might be struggling or, perhaps, had a change of heart. The regret was overwhelming. I think I cried until I had no tears left. Since then, we've been waiting for Susan to come back. But she never returned. I tried calling all her friends, but no one knew where she was. She had a sister who lived abroad, but Susan said they hadn't seen each other in a long time. I didn't have her contact either. Her parents had passed away when she was young, and there were no relatives to turn to. There was to be no one to rely on. Where on earth did she go? Why did she leave? I found myself increasingly unable to understand what Susan was thinking. Still, because I wanted to believe in her, I never proceeded with the divorce. Since then, I've been raising Michelle on my own. She never became rebellious, and not to brag, but she turned out to be a great kid. Michelle is good at cooking, and she makes delicious scrambled eggs for breakfast. It tasted a little plain but somehow comforting, similar to the scrambled eggs my wife would make. As Michelle grew, she began to resemble Susan more and more. Her smile while covering her mouth with narrowed eyes, her wide-open mouth when she was surprised, and her casual gestures were all just like Susan in her school days. Seeing my daughter reminds me of her and made me feel like my heart was going to burst. Whenever I show a sad face, Michelle comes up to me with a big smile and says, "Cheer up, Dad. Come on, smile, smile." Her face was just like Susan's, and it really tugged my heart. For me, Michelle was the only reason to live. Without her, I probably couldn't have recovered from the shock. Michelle attended local schools for middle and high school, and instead of going to college, she entered the workforce. Being the kind soul she is, she might have given up on college thinking she didn't want to burden me. As a low-paid salaried worker who wasn't very good at his job, I never climbed the corporate ladder and am still a regular employee. It's pretty pathetic. Especially when my daughter is working so hard. Even after becoming a working adult, Michelle didn't live on her own and stayed to live with me. I always told her, "You can live your life the way you want." However, she would laugh and say, "I am living the way I want to. Besides, Dad, you wouldn't be able to cook if I left, right? I can't just leave you and live by myself." It made me really happy that she chose to stay by my side. But one day, Michelle will meet a wonderful man and get married. Even though it's still in the future, it sometimes makes me feel sad. My daughter had turned 20 this year. And on her birthday, we received a letter. It was in a cute envelope with floral patterns, addressed to both Michelle and me. When I looked at who it was from, Susan's name was written there. Stunned, I stood there as Michelle came up from behind. She whispered, "Mom." We opened the envelope, and there it was, a letter written in Susan's familiar handwriting. It was definitely Susan's writing. She writes beautifully, in a feminine way. We read the letter intently. "I'm sorry for leaving so suddenly. You must be resenting me for being so selfish. I'm filled with remorse thinking about how much you both must have worried and suffered." As we read, tears streamed down both mine and Michelle's cheeks. At the end of the letter, it said, "There's something I want to give to you both. It's with Claire, so please go see her." Claire is Susan's twin sister. She had been living abroad for years, and Susan said she hadn't been in contact, but Claire's contact information was in the letter. When I called, Claire answered with a voice that sounded relieved yet a bit sad. "I'm glad you contacted me." I asked Claire. Susan wrote in her letter that she has something to give us. "Where is she now?" Claire simply said, "Let's meet in person and talk." After getting her address, Michelle and I went to Claire's apartment a few days later. It seemed she had returned from abroad a few years ago. After exchanging greetings, we were led into the living room. Claire said, "Thank you for coming all the way here today." Looking at Michelle, she continued, "You've grown so much. You look just like my sister." Her words almost tore my heart apart. I asked, "Where is Susan? We want to see her." Claire looked down and said, "I'll take you to her. I'll explain everything once we get there." She drove us for about an hour, and we arrived at a large hospital overlooking the sea. What does this mean? Is Mom sick? Our minds were in a panic. With a sad expression, Claire told us that Susan had early onset dementia. Susan was advised by doctors to be hospitalized and undergo rehabilitation, but she couldn't bring herself to tell us. She left home because she didn't want to be a burden, and she didn't want us to see her gradually forget her own family. She thought telling me the truth would only worry me. So, that's why Susan decided to leave us and was admitted to the hospital. Claire was the only one informed about it. Hearing that Susan's condition had progressed so much that she no longer recognized even Claire, I broke down crying on the spot. Michelle was crying too. It seems Susan, before forgetting her family, had asked Claire to deliver the letter on Michelle's 20th birthday. Claire took out a small jewelry box from her bag, presenting a necklace and a ring, said, "She wanted me to give these to you too." The necklace was a treasure Susan had always cherished. It was the first thing I bought for her on our first date when we were students. And the ring. It was our wedding ring. I couldn't afford anything fancy on my low salary, but Susan had cried big tears of joy, saying, "Thank you, thank you." Also, there's this. Claire handed us a letter. It was filled with memories of a family trip we took together. The time we went to an amusement park where Michelle got too excited and hurt herself, and the time I fell over in another amusement park and became a laughing stock. Susan wrote these memories down while she still remembered. She asked me to deliver this letter, the necklace and ring, when Michelle turned 20. Claire explained. Susan had entrusted her feelings and wishes to her sister, Claire. Claire, with tears in her eyes, said, "I really wanted to contact you sooner, but I couldn't break the promise I made with my sister. No, Claire, I'm grateful to you. Thank you for keeping Susan's feelings safe." I thanked Claire. "Thank you, Aunt Claire." Michelle also expressed her gratitude. And so, after a decade we were finally able to meet Susan again. When Claire opened the door to the hospital room, there was Susan, now aged with streaks of gray in her hair. "Oh, hello. You must be from the room next door, right? And who might this gentleman and lovely lady be? Nice to meet you." I had thought about what I would say if I ever met my wife again. I had been thinking about it for decades now. But when the time had finally come to look her in the eye, I was speechless. Moreover, I had never imagined a situation like this. The moment our eyes met, my chest tightened and tears spilled over. "Oh dear, why are you crying so much? Did something sad happen?" Susan looked at us worriedly. "No, we came to clean the hospital today, and I guess the disinfectant got in my eyes." I lied awkwardly. "Oh, I see. Be careful." As we stepped out of the room, Michelle, her eyes red, patted my back, saying, "Smile, Dad, smile." Susan had always been my greatest support, more than anyone else. She cared for me more than anyone else. Yet, I hadn't noticed her suffering at all. I felt foolish for not realizing it. Seeing me downcast, Michelle told me, "Mom might have forgotten about us, but the memories we made as a family are still in our hearts." I think it's the same for her. She might forget in her mind, but her heart remembers. Let's support Mom as much as we can from now on. Yeah, you're right. Proud of the wonderful daughter I had, I was moved to tears again. We can bring back the memories Susan has forgotten. Nor can we reclaim the time we weren't together. But if it helps her in any way, I want to be there for her, to support her as much as I can. From the next day, Michelle and I visited Susan anytime we could. We talked to her about daily things and about everything and anything. Susan seemed to perk up, saying, "Chatting really activates the brain, doesn't it?" On the shelf in her hospital room, there were old family photos of us. "Isn't this photo wonderful? It brings back such nostalgic feelings. I feel the same when chatting with you. It's very comforting," Susan said, smiling at Michelle and me. "We feel the same way." Michelle and I smiled back at Susan. The three of us, laughing together as a family. Able to be with my wife and daughter. How long I had been waiting for such days. Even if she forgets, our bond as a precious family will never change. I want to support her, always and forever.